welcome to a special edition of In the Cordon. In the Cordon is the place where every cricketer wants to be. I'm your host, Callum Dunk, and joining me for a special preview of the Ashes starting this week is Matt Hunter from Maximum Cricket in New Zealand. Matt, how are you, mate? Thanks for joining me.
Yeah, good. Really stoked to be in the Cordon. As a former slip fielder myself, really enjoyed the conversations in the slip cordon. And once you're out of that cordon, there's just nothing that can replace that sort of chat. So good to be back in, and looking forward to talk about my two older brothers being England and Australia going at it.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's such a series that everyone looks forward to. And as an Australian, it's almost more special when it is in England. It's just got that different entire feel about it compared to, when the Poms do come over to Australia. So, and with the way that England have been going over the last 12 months under Ben Stokes and Brendan McCullum, it's just going to be a series that's going to have lots of ups and downs for both teams. And we'll do our best to try and dissect it all tonight. But let's quickly talk about the World Test Championship final and what a moment it was for Australia as Scott Boland takes the catch off Nathan Lyon's bowling to dismiss Mohammad Siraj. Obviously set up on the first day with great innings from Travis Head and Steve Smith. Whether it was the right decision for India to bowl first, considering that pretty much the entire team was coming off the back of the IPL, only bowling 4 over spells, was it the right call on day one? Matty, what do you think about the World Test Championship final? And, we could say both of our nations have won World Test Championship finals over India, which is very pleasing. How did you sum it all up?
Yeah, good to have a conversation between two World Test Championship winners. So that's exciting. Look, it was an interesting game because I felt like the best team won, and there's a lot of talk about whether Ashwin should have played and whether they should have bowled first or batted first. And the reality is India just didn't turn up on that first day, and Head and Smith ran amok in those last 2 sessions of the first day. And to India's credit, they did fight back to give themselves an outside chance on that last day. But when you start after the first day, when it's 300 for 3, it's tough to come back from there.
Yeah, it was. I was pretty critical of Tim Paine last time Australia went over to England. He won the toss and elected to bowl, and Jack Leach ended up taking 4 or 5 wickets in the 4th innings of that game. So the Oval is traditionally a place where you do want to bat first because it is one of the more conducive grounds to spin. And I feel like if India had a batted first and had Ashwin and Jadeja on that last day, it could have been an entirely different story. But a lot's been made of India's preparation going into this game, all coming off the back of the IPL. Australians had pretty much the opposite preparation. Only Warner and Hazlewood, even though Hazlewood didn't play many games of the IPL, Warner was really the only player of note who was, featured heavily in that tournament. So it probably ended up playing into Australia's favour that a few of them had experienced county cricket. But just before we move into our Ashes preview, do you think the World Test Championship final should turn into the best of 3 matches instead of just a singular test?
I think it does need a few tweaks to it. I think I really enjoy the competition as a whole, and I do like the atmosphere of a straight final. I think a 3-test series final, it sounds good in theory until you get a dead rubber or until the series sort of peters out. And I think I said this on our pod the other day, but I would like to see like a semis and final in 2 weeks. I would like to see sort of 1 versus 4, 2 versus 3, and then the winners play each other the following week. Get a real sort of build up to with this big event. I think some of the issues around the final is there's like this big gap in between games, and then there's just this one game that's almost like a warm up for the Ashes plonked in the middle of June, and there's no sort of build up and from the media or anything. It's just all of a sudden IPL finished, we're into the World Test Championship. There's no sort of build up, which I think is missing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I suppose it leads into my next question. Should it always be played in England? And if it is played in England, I don't understand why it's not played at Lords. I know the Oval's a really nice ground. I've been there for myself and had a tour, and it's a wonderful place. But, Lords is just the home of cricket. What's your thoughts on that one?
Yeah, the original final was supposed to be at Lords, I believe, and then obviously COVID hit, and then they got moved to Southampton, which wasn't ideal. Yeah, I don't know why they picked the Oval. It's a strange one, but I guess I would say that like cricket in England does produce the best matches for whatever reason. They have pitches that are conducive to spin, to pace, to batting. There's just this perfect amount of evenness between bat and ball that I just don't think you can get anywhere else. But to say that we just have it always at one venue, one country is going to be tough. I'd like to see it moved around, kind of like the Super Bowl, where it's a different venue each time, and people bid for it, and it's like this big money making sort of thing. But yeah, I can see why it's in England, because it's going to make them the most money. They're always going to get crowds. Like if this game was in New Zealand, for instance, like you're probably not going to get the crowds. You're not going to make the money. So I get that. I get that issue as well. But yeah, it'd be good to change it up every now and then. See some teams. Like imagine Australia, New Zealand, at Delhi or something like that. That'd be, you just never sort of see that sort of scenario before.
Yeah, it would be an interesting topic as we go forward, and we could talk about the finance of cricket and how that's affecting the game on a separate episode. But the first test between Australia and England starts on Friday at Edgbaston. Edgbaston is a pretty flat wicket generally, and last time Australia played there, they got over England. Steve Smith made 144, 142 in that comeback test after Sandpaper Gate. And Nathan Lyon took 6 wickets on the last day. So it generally does turn. And one of the key things that we did want to talk about was England's inclusion of Moeen Ali after Jack Leach unfortunately sustained a stress fracture. He's been a vital part of that England team under Stokes and McCullum. So do you think it's the right decision by England to bring back Moeen Ali? And because they have brought back Moeen Ali, does it highlight a particular concern in their spin bowling stocks in county cricket? And does it say a lot about the wickets that are being played on in county cricket as well?
Yeah, it's probably a similar issue to here in New Zealand, where we just don't produce spinners as well, because we're always playing on wickets that are conducive to seam bowling. So if you're trying to win a test at any given point, you're always just going to pick your best sort of players, and sometimes that's 4 or 5 seamers. I think the last spinner to play for England was Matt Parkinson, and he can't even make Lancashire at the moment. So that's a hole in your sort of structure. So I think for such an important series, England have just gone, let's go with someone that's been there, done it before, and Moeen Ali. Jack Leach is a big loss. I feel bad for him. I feel like it's been a rough road, and he's finally, this is probably the peak of his spin bowling career. But I'd be surprised if he wasn't whacked out of the attack anyway. Like, I think Australia have sort of made it a point to sort of smack the spinner out of the attack, and I don't think Moeen Ali fixes that problem either. Like, I think he averages around 60 against Australia with the ball, but it's with the bat that's going to make it a little bit more interesting when you've got a middle order of Brook, Bairstow, Stokes, and now Moeen Ali at 8. That's very dangerous from an Australian side.
Oh, absolutely. And I'm in agreement to you that, England have been pretty harsh on their spin bowlers in recent times. And it wasn't until Stokes and McCullum came in and really, settled Jack Leach. Under Root's captaincy, he was not played. Sometimes Root would act as the sole spinner. They'd always try and go 4 seamers. And it depended a little bit on Stokes' fitness and availability. So, Dom Bess wasn't even considered. He's someone that could, bowl spin and bat at 8 as well. But I can see why they've gone for Moeen Ali. They've been trying to get him back into that English lineup for a little bit, trying to probe him out of retirement. And now this is the straw that's broken the camel's back. So, do you think that what would your three paces be for England going into this test? Because Mark Wood bowled really well out in Australia last time. Chris Woakes averages better than Broad and Anderson in English conditions as well. So, England have got a lot of options with the rise of Ollie Robinson over the last 2 years as well.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think Anderson is obviously a must pick. He's got to play. If he's fit, he's playing. And I think they will go Robinson and Mark Wood if available. And I'm not even 100% sure of that. They may actually just go Broad, Robinson, and Anderson with the Warner aspect. But I just feel like if you go Robinson, Broad, and Anderson, if that pitch does flatten out, which they've said they want flat pitches, the Test series in New Zealand showed that if it does get flat, you can sort of make them pay if it's not going to nibble. So I wonder what the pitch is going to look like first and foremost. And if it is flat, you might need a Mark Wood to sort of break it up a bit, bowl that short stuff. Like if Stokes isn't going to bowl, do they need Mark Wood? So if it was me, I would go Robinson, Anderson, and Mark Wood, because I just think Robinson he's better than Broad now. I think he is genuinely world class. And I just think if you're going to pick Robinson, you might not need Broad as much, which is controversial with the Warner aspect.
Yeah, I'd probably still be going with Stuart Broad in those conditions. And it's probably a genuine toss-up between Broad and Mark Wood. You've got that 145 kilometres per hour, or you've got someone who's got the wood over someone that can genuinely take the game away from you. And, Warner didn't set the world on fire in that World Test Championship final. However, that was a gutsy 43 in very trying conditions on that first day. Unfortunately, got caught down the leg side. So it's more, do you try and you look at it from a psychological point of view, or you look at it from the pitch point of view as well? So it will be a very interesting one to see how that plays out on Friday night. But it leads probably to the bigger issue of there are 5 test matches in 6 weeks, which is a very heavy workload. And I think the reason that it's partially scheduled like this is because England want all of their players to be able to feature in the 100, which goes throughout the entire of August. So do you think that this schedule is ridiculous, or because it's not going to allow all your fast bowlers to play all 5 tests like we've seen in years gone by? And do you see
Risky.
almost like, yeah, it's risky. And for both teams too, but I feel like Australia do have the advantage in that area. I would say our fast bowlers are more dangerous overall as a package, particularly when you've got the likes of Michael Neser who are just sitting in the wings. There's talk that Scotty Boland's playing in this in Australia at the moment. There's talk that Scotty Boland's going to be picked ahead of Josh Hazlewood. So I don't think you would have seen that, 12 months ago. So, what are your thoughts on the overall scheduling, and how do you think it's going to impact selection for both teams?
Yeah, it's going to be a bit of a war of attrition for the bowlers, isn't it, to get through these sort of, 5 tests in 6 weeks, 6 tests for Australia. And it is quite risky, as I said, when your best bowler is turning 41 in this series, and you got Stuart Broad as well, who's like 36. With no Archer, I'm not sure. I think you're right with the attacks. I think the best 11, I think the attacks can sort of even themselves out in English conditions, but I think when you take into consideration the depth in squads, I think bowlers 4 through 5, sort of Australia's are better. You know what I mean? Like when you can just bring in Boland when Hazlewood's off, and then Michael Neser is obviously going to do a job. I just don't know if England have that after Anderson, Broad, Robinson, Wood. I think they're a little unproven after that, but under Bazball, who knows? But yeah, I don't think it's going to help England. So I think that's going to be an interesting one, especially if they're going to make the pitches flat. So there's definitely in a scenario where Australia can bat 140 overs. Smith, Marnus just really, put some miles into the legs of some older bowlers, and then, God forbid they break down. So yeah, quite risky.
Yeah, it will be interesting to see how it plays out, and I don't think we're going to know how it's going to play out until you probably reach those fourth and fifth tests, and it will be interesting if the series is on the line. Do they roll the dice with a couple of blokes on both teams? But one thing that we did want to talk about was the elephant in the room of David Warner. Now, I'm of the opinion that with a bloke like David, I actually thought if it wasn't for that elbow injury in India, he was going to get dropped. That's how bad he was going. People talk a lot about his 200 at the MCG, but when you look at South Africa as a whole, they were a rabble on that tour, and didn't really fire a shot at all in that series. So how many tests does Warner get if he has a few low scores? And we've talked about whether Stuart Broad's going to immediately target him around the wicket, but what are your thoughts on David Warner, and should he even be playing based on his previous record in England? Because I believe he only averages 26 in England and only averages about 35 against England overall.
Yeah, I mean, it was the tour from hell last time, wasn't it? One of the great, it's polar opposite tours from him and Stephen Smith. It was comical stuff at times. Yeah, it's an interesting one. I think I said a while ago that I didn't think he would make it through both tours for India and England. And I still think, like, if he doesn't make runs, I think it's probably the second test. I think after the second test, particularly if they lose one of them or lose two of them, and you need a result, like the heads may sort of roll then. But I've just got this feeling that now that he's sort of announced that his retirement is incoming, he's sort of content with the fact that his career's over. He's not as worried about being in the side. He looked a lot better in that final than I've seen him for a long time. Like, the feet were actually moving, and he was scoring at a reasonable clip, and it just sort of had glimpses of the David Warner of old. So I said on my podcast a while ago that I think that he's going to score more runs than Zach Crawley. And at the time, I thought I was kind of taking the piss, trying to get a rise out of some English listeners. But the more I think about it, I think he will. And I'm not. To be fair, the bar's not high. Zach Crawley isn't a great player, to be fair, but yeah, I think he might, and he doesn't need to average a lot, to be fair, to do a job. If he can average 26, 30, that's a win. It's the hardest place to open in the world. Like, he just can't average like 9, what he did last time. That's where you're getting real strife. So, what is the as an Australian, what's the public perception on Warner? Because he's a bit of a sort of polarizing figure, isn't he?
Yeah, a lot of people certainly have respect for what he did prior to South Africa, and I believe South Africa's tour certainly changed his perception of him. We always knew he was a bit of a rascal, a bit of a cheeky bugger sort of thing. But I don't feel like he's ever been properly accepted by the Australian public since South Africa. That's just my personal take, and you can agree, yeah. You can disagree in the comments. But yeah, now that, as you said, he's announced his retirement, this could be the fairy tale, almost swan song that he's just gearing himself up for. After this series against England, he's only got 3 more test matches in his career, because he ideally wants to finish in front of his home crowd in Sydney against Pakistan. So, now that he knows, it might be just, a chip off the shoulder, he can relax. But I think the thing that concerns me as an Australian is all the bowlers in England, Anderson, Broad, Wokes if he plays, Robinson, they all have the ability to move the ball away from the left-hander. Now, Australia has not chosen to take Cameron Bancroft, who was scoring shield runs for fun over in our Sheffield Shield competition. And all the openers over there are left-handed. You've got Warner, you've got Khawaja, you've got Harris, and you've got Renshaw in that squad too. So I personally hate the fact that Cameron Bancroft's not there, and whether he was there for Renshaw or Marcus Harris is up for debate. But it's a dangerous thing not to have that option, in my opinion. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's a fair point. When you've got 4 left-handers, like it would have been nice just to sort of change it up in the squad, like similar to like a bowling. If you're picking bowling squads, like it's always nice to have a left-hander and sort of change it up. But is Bancroft playing county championship at the moment? Is it?
Yeah,
he's playing
for Somerset at the moment. So I'm not sure whether he's still playing in their Blast team, which is going on at the moment. But I know he was certainly playing for Somerset, and it's actually good to see a lot of the Australians going over and playing county cricket, to be honest. So, Matty, who do you think will firstly win this series? 2, what's the scoreline? And who is your leading run scorer and your leading wicket taker in the series?
Yeah, I mean, this is one of the hardest series to pick. Like if you feel strongly that one side's going to beat the other, I don't think you're properly taking I don't think you're properly thinking about both sides, because you've got 2 sides that are absolutely peaking. Like from a neutral perspective, I just want to see England get 450 in one day and see what Australia think, and then I want to see England get rolled for 60 and then see what England think. Like I just want carnage. But if I was putting my money where my mouth is, I genuinely think this Australian side is very, very good. And I think with no Tim Paine and with Pat Cummins at the helm and McDonald as coach, they just seem like they're a lot more calmer under pressure than they once were. Like they don't get rattled as easily. Like the 2019 team, if they played against Bazball, they would just absolutely crap themselves at what the hell's going on, like they did against Stokes. And I think if you're picking like man for man, I think Australia's a better side. But I think if I was going to pick it would be 3-2, but I could see it going either way. Some of the chat around like from Steve Smith when he's saying, let's see them do it against our attack, like that would concern me if I was an Australian fan, because I want to know that they've got a plan B, that if top of off field up doesn't work, and at some point during the series it's not going to work, England are going to get away. Can they keep composed and have backup plans to take wickets? Because it's not a perfect England side. I don't think that England actually care about winning. I think they just want to entertain, which also would scare me if I was Australian, because that's just not how I was brought up playing cricket. It's kind of odd, if I'm honest, but it's exciting. So I'll go Australia 3-2 with, I think Joe Root's going to score the most runs. I think he's due a big Ashes series. He's never done it. All the good players have done it, and I think it's his time. And I think the obvious most wickets has got to be Cummins if he plays all 5 tests. He's probably the only bowler that's going to play all 5 tests. So I think it's going to be him, or it's going to be like Ollie Robinson from England. I genuinely think he's world class. So those would be my sort of picks. How do you see it?
Yeah, I'm probably seeing it around the 3-2, 2-2 sort of mark. I would probably still be leaning towards Australia, personally. Just with this team is very experienced, and I think if they don't get it done here and properly win, and 2019 was a great series. It was so competitive. You had the magic of Stokes, you had the magic of Smith, but Australia just didn't get it done when they needed to, and it's the last
hung over
two.
it last test.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
So it's Warner's last trip to England. It's Khawaja's last trip to England. Whether Smith can make it to England again in 4 years' time, he's 34 now, just turned 34 now. So he could, but I'd probably say probably his last go. Trav will
At
be
least
there
it's
in
peak,
4
isn't it?
Yeah, Trav will be there in 4 years. Cameron Green will be there in 4 years. Carey will probably be there in 4 years. But it's your bowlers of Stark, Hazelwood, and Boland. Even though Boland has only really been around this team for 18 or so months. But potentially Nathan Lyon's last tour of England, I'd probably be leaning towards the fact that it is. So that's a fair core of your team who are probably never going to get a chance again. So if they know they're never going to get this chance again, I'm probably leaning towards Australia because, otherwise it's going to be an asterisk on the resume sort of thing. So, I'd love to see Australia get it done. I'm probably backing Marnus to be the leading run scorer in this series. The obvious pick would be Steve Smith based on his, record in England. Loves playing at Lords, loves playing at the Oval in particular, has a, twin centuries at Edgbaston last time. But I think Marnus, with the way that he applied himself in England last time, and just how much he's developed as a player in those 4 years since that series, I think he's prime. And as you said, Cummins is probably the obvious one that stands out. But if there are flat pitches, I could see Nathan Lyon playing a really key role for Australia. And, he bowled really well in India. He's in good form at the moment. Took 4 for 41 in that World Test Championship final as well. So, what were you going to say about Nathan Lyon?
I was going to say, England's going to target Nathan Lyon as well, so he's going to have heaps of wicket opportunities. So,
absolutely,
and he's going to play 5 tests, so that's a good shout.
At the end of this series, what's the one, or who is, I should say, the one player that you think will make a genuine name for themselves at the end of this series? Could be Australia or England.
That's a good question. I think I'm leaning on Root. I just think Root's missing an Ashes series, like a signature series. Like I'm talking like, Michael Vaughan's had an Ashes series. Peterson's had numerous Ashes series. Like Stokes has done it, like, those bulk runs where, it's the brightest lights. It's it's what people remember you from. He said it before, and he doesn't have to do it as captain. His time's done. And if Bazball's going to succeed, they're still going to need that steady influence of Joe Root to bet around. He's still, when he's going, it's a fantastic watch, and I just think it's time for him to go to another level.
Yeah, and Joe Root is a phenomenal player. You did a video on your podcast on TikTok the other day. It was Joe Root's gone past 11,000 test runs now. Name the blokes above him, and the list of players above him was just incredible to see. And the fact that he's of that higher caliber, and he will go past Sir Alistair Cook very shortly, but it will be interesting to see how he goes, because he didn't have the greatest series out here, and he didn't have the greatest series in 2019. Hazelwood and Cummins really targeted him in that sort of fifth stump sort of line early on his innings. For me, it's Ben Duckett. I think the way that he has applied himself in Test cricket since he's come back against Pakistan, and obviously those were really flat wickets over in Pakistan, but the fact that he was able to do it in quite difficult conditions as well in New Zealand, against a good, pace attack that consisted of Wagner and Southee as well. Yeah, I think he is someone that is going to certainly enhance his reputation in the series, and um, I think he could really target someone like Mitchell Stark if Stark begins to properly spray the ball early on. When it's really hard, it's going to come onto the bat, and I think he's going to have a really good series. So, um, if England lose this series, is it a disaster for them with the way that they've been playing so electric over the last 12 months? Do you think? Like, how would it be perceived in England if they lost?
Yeah, that's going to be that's the $1 million question, isn't it? My co-host Jacko, he had a good analogy where it's like England have been playing this video game, or they're in a movie, and they've been beating all these bad guys along the way, but now it's the final boss. It's Australia. It's the best attack. It's under the biggest pressure, and it's easy to say that we don't care about winning while you're winning, but I want to see what happens if you go down 2-0 and you get skidded a couple of times. Can you continue that positive approach when the media is going to turn their back on you that quickly? Because they don't care about an away series in Pakistan. They don't care about beating New Zealand or beating South Africa. They care about beating Australia. And if you fall flat on your face, that there's going to be people sort of writing all sorts of articles. And at that point, can you continue along this path? They keep telling us they will, so I'm going to assume they will, but that's going to be the real question, because at some point Australia will get on top of them, and it's how they bounce back.
Absolutely. And I think if we genuinely lose, it's going to be devastation for us. The point that I reiterated earlier about, it's the core of our team's last chance. And we've seen what happens when big chunks of your team leave in a short period of time. I think back to, Michael Clark and Mitchell Johnson leaving within 6 months of each other. I think of Warne, McGrath, Langer, all leaving at the end of that Ashes test as well. So, whilst I've got you, what do you think the future of Test cricket is? Because I've been listening to yourself, listening to the grade cricketer. With the financial model of Test cricket at the moment, will it be long before it's just Australia, England, and India, sort of playing Test cricket? And you probably throw New Zealand into that as well, considering they don't have a really standout like T20 tournament as we've seen. What are your thoughts on that before we finish up?
Yeah, it's looking pretty likely, isn't it? If it hasn't been like that, it almost is at this point. Like, I think New Zealand, we had a nice big golden patch where we had a whole bunch of good players come together at once, and it culminated in a World Test Championship, and we'll forever remember that. But there's been a bit of a decline since, and I think the distance is probably going to continue to grow as the sort of the franchises take over, and Test cricket becomes more of a chore for some of these lesser nations, like in terms of they're not making enough money, which is a shame. So, I mean, the ball's probably in India's court. What do they want to do with it? I mean, rightly or wrongly, they hold all the cards. So, if they want to invest in Test cricket and get more people playing, then so be it. Otherwise, I'm going to have to either support England or Australia going forward, because New Zealand might not be playing too much more Test cricket.
Yeah, it would be a real shame if, Test cricket, as we've always known it, just slowly starts to fade away. But, Matty, I just want to say a big thank you for coming on in the Cordon. It's been a real privilege to talk with you about the upcoming Ashes series and the World Test Championship final. Hopefully, we're able to have a few more chats in the future about the world of cricket.
Yeah, mate. Thanks for having me. Absolute pleasure. Looking forward to a bit of carnage, and when Australia tours New Zealand in the summer, maybe we'll have another chat then.
Absolutely. Thank you so much to those of you who are tuning in at home. Make sure that you stay updated with our social media platforms for more exciting episodes and updates. Take care, everyone. Cheers.